Baristas get obsessed about a lot of things, like a tasty new single origin coffee, a custom milk jug, the stitching on a handmade leather apron, stroking their perfectly manicured facial hair, and finding the perfect brew temperature. But temperature is trickier than it seems. Yes, water temperature can have a big impact on the flavor of coffee, but at the same time, trying to hit a specific number can actually take you in the wrong direction. Plot twist, stick around and I'll explain what I mean. In part 4 on our series on espresso extraction, we're taking a look at brew temperature and trying to answer a couple of key questions. Is brew temperature the holy grail of perfect espresso? And what temperature should I set my machine to? As usual, we conscripted the help of our engineer, Johnny, and got to work. When it comes to brew temperature, the old rule of thumb for baristas has always been that higher temperatures work better for lighter roasts, while lower temperatures work better for darker roasts. And that's exactly what we found when we tested blends roasted at 3 different roast colors across a range of temperatures. The thinking here is that higher temperatures help to tame the acidity of lighter roasts, while lower temperatures minimize the bitterness of darker roasts. Now, over the years, there has been a number of studies showing how different brew temperatures affect the balance of sweetness, acidity, and the bitterness in coffee. I'll link to more down below if you're keen to take a look. But for now, we'll say that the old rule lines up with what our tasters preferred on the day. One thing worth noting is that these preferences didn't really hold up when we added milk to coffee. With milk, our tasters preferred higher temperatures across all roast types, commenting on better overall smoothness and cut through when served as a flat white. That's not a huge surprise, given that the fats and sugars in milk help to balance the more aggressive notes from the higher temperature espressos. But still worth mentioning given that the majority of espresso coffee is served with milk, at least here in Australia anyway. Okay, so we know that making relatively big changes to brew temperature certainly changes the flavor. But what about small changes, like a single degree? How much of a difference do small changes like this really make? If you're new to coffee, you might be wondering why it's even worth asking this question at all. I mean, most people don't stress over the differences of a single degree when they're sitting in their oven to cook a roast dinner. But the world of coffee is a little different. Over the last 20 years, both baristas and espresso machine manufacturers have been obsessed with achieving precise control of brewing temperature, with a host of commercial and domestic espresso machines fitted with technology that allows the water in the boiler to be kept stable down to an accuracy plus or minus of about 0.1 degree. Yep, crazy accurate. Now, with equipment this precise, surely finding the perfect temperature is easy. Just set, forget, and you're golden. In truth, when you get down to small variations like this, then there's a couple of reasons why insisting on a magical number isn't helpful in our search for better tasting coffee. Here, let me explain. The first problem is the offset. Just because you set the temperature on the machine's display to say 93 degrees Celsius doesn't mean that you're going to get 93 degrees at the group head. That's because the temperature at the probe is measuring the water back in the boiler, and the water loses heat surprisingly very quickly on its short little path up to the bed of coffee. To get around this, most machines have an offset value. That is, a number that compensates for this difference, so that when you select 93 on the display, you actually get 93 degrees at the group head as well. This is good in theory, but in our experience, these values often don't or aren't set up correctly. On the machines we tested, we found that some were very close to the temperature on the display, but most were 3 to 5 degrees cooler than what the machine was showing. Now, in most cases, this can be recalibrated in the machine, but it does require a specialized device like this, which most baristas don't have access to. Correcting the offset also doesn't fix the other problem with controlling brew temperature, the coffee itself. You see, when we're extracting espresso, the temperature that really matters is the combined temperature of both water and coffee together in the basket. When the piping hot brewing water hits a slightly warm bed of coffee, the mix of coffee and water eventually reaches an equilibrium between the two. I'll give a shout out to the team at Barista Hustle for their work on this. A link to their post is down below if you want to take a closer look. In short, they found that the temperature of ground coffee can vary significantly from room temperature up to over 50 degrees Celsius during peak periods. This variation can have a noticeable effect on the equilibrium temperature, causing it to change by several degrees, which is more than enough to create a noticeable difference in the balance of flavor throughout the day. They also point out that the extraction time also affects brewing temperature, with slower shots resulting in a lower equilibrium temperature. Okay, so what do we have to do with all this information? Firstly, it's probably wise to stop obsessing over a specific number, as much as the OCD in me definitely wants to. I know people love a benchmark, and some people will tell you that they get best results by brewing at a specific temperature. That may be true for them, definitely nothing wrong with that. But it's also highly unlikely that you'll be getting exactly the same result just by setting your machine to that same number. For that reason, I think it's best to dial in the ideal brew temperature by taste. Here's how I go about doing that. First up, we need to get our basic espresso recipe dialed in. That is the amount of ground coffee, the volume of liquid espresso, and the extraction time. That's because brew temperature isn't really going to fix major extraction problems, like over or under extraction. So you really need to get those basics locked in first. Once we've got that dialed in, then we can think of brew temperature like a fine tuner to make small adjustments to the overall balance of sweetness, acidity, and bitterness. By increasing the temp, you can bring out a little bit more sweetness and body. This can be a great way to balance a coffee that is a little acidic or thin. On the other hand, higher temps will also bring out more of those roasty, bitter flavors. So if you're tasting too much of this in the cup, then lowering the temp can be a useful way to bring this back into balance. Lowering the brew temperature can also be a handy way to offset the change in flavor caused by ground coffee heating up during busy periods of the day. It's hard to give specific numbers on this, but it is something that is fairly easy to adjust and experiment with if you notice that the flavor has drifted away from where you expect it or want it to be. Keeping in mind that when you change the brew temperature, you'll generally need to allow for a few minutes of the water to stabilize at the new temperature. When lowering the temperature, it's also a good idea to run some water through the group head to help drop that temperature more quickly as the fresh water enters into the espresso machine. One more tip on temperature. Please, for the sake of my sanity, keep that portafilter locked in the group head when you're not brewing coffee. I know it's basic training, but it does really help keep everything more temperature stable. Okay, so if you're interested in learning more about how to adjust espresso by taste, then you should definitely check out this video, which dives into these details a lot more. Until next time, I hope this wall of information has been really helpful. So till next time, stay stoked.